Some of you, I think, know that I have an exercise bike in the home that I live in, that you own, by the way, with Father Sam. Deacon John knows, because he has the same bike. And it's not that we're competitive, but it is a way for me to encourage him, just to make sure that that bike is getting used. Now, I have these different instructors, and you come to like certain ones and resonate with them, but it's really interesting. I've actually gotten 2 or 3 homily ideas out of something they share about working out. And for me, I really find that exercise is actually part of faith, to be honest. I find that if I don't get my heart up 3-4 times a week, I'm less human. And so I'm less able to live the strength of faith, which I want to. So for me personally, it's a kind of good thing. But a few days back, this young lady shared this kind of encouragement. And she said, remember, your reality is what you believe. Remember, your reality is what you believe. Now, let's give her the benefit of the doubt and say, there is something true that positive thinking can be helpful. It can help us do difficult things that are actually good but hard. So I think she was saying that we're exercising at an early hour, right? So mind over matter, your reality is what you want to believe. And yet, you hear this conventional wisdom so often, and it couldn't actually be more opposite of the truth, which our experience bears out. Like, no, it's actually the opposite for faith. We believe our faith corresponds to reality. And because of that, our faith actually needs to deepen and to be purified so that I can actually live in reality. I want to begin, what is your experience of faith? How would you describe it to someone if I just gave you a little homework to say, here's what faith is to me. Here's how I experience faith. I mean, it is the reason we gather, isn't it? I find that there can be some huge misconceptions with faith. Faith experience as something kind of like contingent. Like, my parents want me to believe as an adolescent so that fill in the blank. My behavior is like this, I act like this. So some of us can react to people who even want our faith to grow because so much of their experience has been like a contingent kind of faith, like it's a means to a greater end, instead of actually the end itself. I think we all experience that. Second, I think many times, especially in the United States today, we can conceive of faith as mainly in the intellect. It's mainly in my mind. It's mainly about what I think. Well, that kind of faith actually isn't going to get you through the hardest points of life, because faith is about the choices you make, the habits, the steps you take. It's actually about trust. And trust is something deeper than just your mind as the measure. Third and final, I think some of us think to believe, we actually have to turn off our mind. Just have faith. And sometimes that means just take a blind leap. Do something that's not reasonable. Just cross your fingers. I don't know if any of those resonate for you, but today's gospel gives us this beautiful opportunity for you and I to reflect on faith. And let's begin from the experience of those disciples, huh? This encounter with Jesus left a very deep and lasting impression on them. The truth is, there's only like a handful of times in the Gospels where Jesus says, oh, like he's impressed, he's moved by something. And do you know the majority of the times are? He says, oh, you faithless generation. But here it's the opposite. It's tremendously positive. This gospel ends with, oh, woman, This is amazing faith. That is great faith. And you can see these disciples like, whoa, we want that. And so St. Matthew's writing his gospel how many years later, among all the different encounters with Jesus, this encounter has a pride of place. And I want to walk you through it, and I want you to stay true to your own experience of faith as you listen. Because this woman, this unnamed woman, has so much to hold up to us. First, she sees Jesus from afar, and what's going on in her life? She's desperate. She's desperate. Her child is suffering, and she has no remedies. Every once in a while, as a priest, when I'm in different hospitals, I come across these parents, where the child's been suffering with something that they feel so helpless about. And it's so impressive, the lengths they've gone to, how many different doctors and methods. I mean, there's nothing more important. And so this woman cries out, and she recognizes something because she says, Lord, Kyrios, have mercy on me, my daughter is ill. My daughter's ill. So she sees something in Jesus, like he's beyond, he's exceptional. He has power to do this. I don't know how, but I trust him. Now, if you can, just with your senses, imagine the scene, Jesus walking along, accompanied by his disciples, and all they hear, the only thing filling up the atmosphere, is this woman's voice again and again and again, just crying out. It's almost kind of distressing, isn't it? Now, there's something noble about this first step, to believe that he is God. And yet there's something about her petition that she's demanding, not asking. Who could blame her? She's desperate. We have areas of our own life where we feel that same desperation. But if we're offended by why God doesn't respond immediately, Jesus doesn't, well, he knows our hearts. And you know what's so tenacious in the human heart? The desire to control circumstances, to control other people, and even to control God. I'm not interested in a relationship with God. I don't actually want to be close to him. I just want God to fix this. I want him to do this. Imagine if he responded to us every time in that instance. It wouldn't actually be for our own good. It's a futile exercise, as if we can control God. But the creature and our fallenness, our audacity, yeah, we do that. We even imagine how we'd design the world if we were God. So this leads to the second level. And it's so beautiful because her voice is going, it's so distressing that the disciples say to Jesus, you got to send her away. If you're not going to do anything, at least just send her away. And he speaks to them. We don't know how close she is, but likely she can hear. And he says, well, I'm a shepherd. I've come for the lost sheep. Of course, there's all sorts of categories. Those who are in the in crowd, the chosen people, those who are foreigners, the out crowd. But she doesn't necessarily hear it in those categories. She says, okay, he's a good shepherd. He's good. And now what does she do, though? She comes up to him, we don't know for how long, and she does him homage. She uses the same word, Lord, he's God, but she actually enters into the silence of Jesus, who's not responding to her, and she sits at his feet. This is so amazing. This is not just to believe in God. Yeah, he exists. I believe all the doctrines more or less. Sign me up. I'm Catholic. I'm Christian. It's to believe that this God exists and he's good, and it's to taste it for ourselves. Think of what the Psalm says. Taste and see that the Lord is good. You know, when I was vocation director for a few years, it was an assignment where I had to learn a lot. I was in charge, entrusted with all the young people who felt that maybe they had a call to priesthood or religious life. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I was supposed to walk with them. I felt a lot of pressure. Some of my brother priests would say, how many you got in the seminary this year? And I'd go to high schools and they think I was like recruiting, as if I know what their vocation is. And then I came across something Pope Benedict said, and it just set me free. And it focused me to know what I was doing. He said, if we teach young people how to pray, how to be comfortable with silence, how to listen for God's voice, how to experience His touches in their interior, how to relate their whole heart to Him, he said, then we can trust them with their vocation. Do you know I believe the same thing now about being pastor? I have no program. I think the most important thing I've done early on with my associate was to pray and invite Mary to be here. I saw before after to that. But if there was anything to a program, it's this. It's like unless we actually learn to pray and to come alive to God's presence, everything's just form. It's just words. It can actually just be through the motions. And it's not going to actually sustain me. I wonder how you experience silence. I think most of us are afraid of it. We're afraid to face what comes up in our heart. We're afraid silence is like a void, something negative, and so we fill it up. We fill it up. Or is silence actually the privileged place where God's going to do something? He's going to speak to us. No, I wasn't here, neither Father Sam last week, because we were away with 42 women from this parish in South Dakota, leading most of them, vast majority, on their very first silent retreat. They were excited, they were nervous. But then you experience like, no, silence isn't a void to be endured. It's full. God actually wants to meet me there. One woman said, well, many in their own ways, it's like I got back my heart. It's like I'm more fully alive it's like I was living two-dimensionally, and now I got eyes to see, and I got a heart to receive and that's sensitive, you know? So I know we can read this and say, Jesus is silent, that means He's indifferent. That means He's uncaring. Or is it that His silence invites her to a deeper depth? And she responds, she comes to Him and she says, you're good. And I adore you and I do you homage. And then third and finally, Jesus kind of says, well, you know, this isn't, I'm kind of doing this right now. And she has the strength to press into Him. I mean, this woman, who is this woman? Like, yeah, but even the dogs, Lord, get the scraps. This is faith that's trust. This is faith that's believing into God. And He responds. Do you notice that His response is the same when He came to Mary of Nazareth, that young woman? Remember what she said after the angel? She's filled with wonder, a little fear, a lot of hope. She says, be it done unto me according to your word. Well, now Jesus reverses that, and He says, that faith, whew, be it done unto you according to what you just asked me. And imagine those disciples just like, so that's faith. It's believing in God, yes, that He exists, that He's the origin of everything, the creator of the heavens and the earth, all I can see and can't see. He's the final end. But this has to go deeper than assent of the intellect. I have to taste for myself in the circumstances of my life, and no one can do it for me. That this God is good. He's good. He only wants what's good for me. And it's in that silence, if I dare to approach Him and learn how He speaks and how He touches me, well, then things become different. And then I learn to live faith, not as something static, but as dynamic. Something that's the deepest part of my life. What's the characteristic that marks Jesus in this gospel? What she experienced? What she asked for? Mercy. You know the best definition of mercy I've heard? Mercy is to be loved so unconditionally, personally, in the experience of your own misery. Where life is hard, you feel helpless, you know your own weakness, you experience your own poverty. I can't cause something to happen that I really want to. And in that place, if I can open my heart in that beautiful silent exchange encounter, the Lord will meet me. He will meet you. And maybe we don't do that because then we're a little afraid. Well, I'm miserable here, but at least I know this misery. If I let him meet me here, where's this all going to go? But isn't that exciting? Isn't that what we all want? Isn't that what we want to live? I'll close with this, but I played a song for the women, one of my favorite, Matt Maher. He's just a great, I feel like his lyrics are anointed, but one of the hymns of the retreat was he's singing a prayer to the Lord, give me a future not my own. You know, if you get what you want, you just get what you want. But if you give your deepest desires to the Lord and you ask him to actually lead you in life and meet you, well, then life becomes infinitely more beautiful, rich, and meaningful. So, Lord, we thank you today for this woman, and we ask that you would give us a share of her beautiful faith that impressed and moved your heart.